by the time we start talking, we'll have forgotten you had said that.
Exactly.
That's
and
what he
we'll
likes.
just feel relaxed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We just brought some thoughts and
Yeah,
some
yeah,
fun
yeah.
stuff.
Great. You know, he lives up the street, right?
That's what, yeah, you had mentioned.
Awesome. I don't think I know this one.
Stop looking at it. So welcome to the library conversations that we're having at the Good Life Center. It's so nice for people to come here and want to have these conversations, to open up. You know, how do we be relevant in the world? How do we reach out a little bit further? How do we open ideas? This particular one is helmed by me because it's where I am at this place in my life. I'm Dr. Rachael M, and I write on bread philosophy and Scott Nearing specifically. And so these are the places that I'm thinking to open up. And I sent that introduction to you to see if you were interested in talking about this. So we welcome Jonathan Stevens of Hungry Ghost Bread. Thank you so much for coming up. Dr. Kate Farrington, Dr. Sam Jones, Baker Josh Rollson, also welcome. And I think that between us, between your environmental ethics, between your installation art and deep sense of opening up wild care, both your baking and your poetry and your music, both of you, you're both in a similar path, which is very interesting to me, but you bring in this whole Buddhist philosophy that I think it's gonna, I don't know, it excites me in many ways. So what did anybody think about the intro I sent? Was that interesting at all? Was that a good jumping off point?
Would it be worth reading it a little bit?
I would love if you'd read a little bit.
Do you have it?
I probably have it.
I know I could find it. I've been having a little trouble with my email, so I looked at it early this morning, but then trying to find it again is going to be.
Don't worry, we'll edit out this part.
Thank you.
We have editors.
Okay, here we go. Library conversation. Okay, I'll just read it for everyone. Hello, dear all. The Good Life Center graciously invites you to the second mini conference in the series, Library Conversations, on today. These conversations are meant to get folks from different backgrounds into dialogue to reimagine new futures, responding to the world we are negotiating in care of each other and our impact. This one, in particular, opens the conversation about the existential possibilities of food systems, health, ecology, craft, philosophy, and the artistry of making. For just a start, I've attached the initial intro. We welcome great thinkers and doers with an interest to this topic, with special guests added to our board members, including poet, baker, musicians Jonathan Stevens and Josh Rollson, and environmental ethics artist, writer, Dr. Kate Farrington. We welcome the rest of you to join us as an audience. We also offer a gardens tour and refreshments, which we've just commenced.
And so
let's read the text.
Oh, she wants you to go all the way.
Okay, going all the way. Okay, so the panel. So why bread? Though philosophy itself is an engaged process of thinking and being in the current social climes and topologies of consensus culture, this practice is not intrinsically valued. It is equated with a cultural bias of affluence and is primarily limited to a sphere of academia. The inclusion of bread delimits this concern and places the practice of thinking into the hands of the people. As a practice of equivalence, bread has always had an adaptive history of practical and political engagement. It crystallizes and makes concrete the very attention required to think and to be in the concern of the Anthropocene. Capitalist bread culture has lost its taste, its structure, its terroir, and it has become a mealy mass of monocultured complacency, eliciting no nutrition, no nurture. It has become a stale, white, excessively processed product, devaluing craft, community, and life itself. Bread, because Scott Nearing says, it is in bread labor where we connect to the earth and ourselves in a personal responsibility which obliterates the personal and emphasizes the responsibility unto the world. Bread, because Peter Schumann believes that it is sourdough that feeds the soul as well as the body and the mind. It is fermentation for creativity. Bread, because Penny Rambaud thinks his desire and understanding of life comes from attending to the practice of making bread, fueling new possibilities in the world. Bread, because it is a response to the call of the Dark Mountains Manifesto of uncivilization toward a new narrative defining the state of a civilized world, propelling humans toward extinction. Bread is as an aesthetic act of self-preservation in a responsibility of care for the world in which we interact. It attends to the elemental transformative power of satisfaction, the good, adaptation, and the joy of life. It is not a metaphor for philosophy, though it acts as an aesthetic representation of class issues, religious history, and an artistic expression. It stands as a reclamation of philosophy, of thinking and being. It is a manner of thought with its own history, practice, and attention. It is concerned with the energy given to the world to concern to certain foci and the labor we find pleasure in. Bread philosophy is seen as a refusal of the dominant capitalist saturation of the world and as an aesthetic sense combining the ethical prerogative with the creative and cooperative solutions.
Thank you for reading all that.
Thank you for writing it.
That was a lot. In a
It's
little
a lot.
In a little bit.
Yeah, I'm going to need to refer.
All right. Who wants to start off?
Well, I wrote it.
All right. Oh, that's your excuse.
Now you do the work.
Well, let's talk about bread first, right? Let's talk about the simple subject. What is bread? I think I'd love to hear from any of you how much you think bread is, or how we want to define bread in that sense. I think for me, I'll just jump right in, right? For me, what's most remarkable about bread as a thing, outside of the philosophical and whatnot, is that bread is, as we were speaking earlier, it's an inherently cultural item. It is. When I talk about bread in the classes that I teach, one of the things that I love to point out is how deeply embedded bread is as a cultural object. It's a cultural process, a cultural product. Bread is inherently human, and it is, in my experience, in my opinion, probably more uniquely human than anything else that we do. When we look at all of the other things that humans do, we make art, we have reason, we use tools, all of that. We can find representations and different systems of that within other species. Bread is uniquely human. And it is also, as I said, uniquely cultural. The kind of bread you eat, the kind of bread you make, the kind of bread that you love and grow up on is entirely rooted in where you were born, the culture you were born into, and the climate that you're born into. The problem, as sort of hinted at in the introduction for me, is that as we move further and further into this globalized capitalist world, we get farther and farther away from that cultural rooting of bread as an object. So I'd love to throw that on the table and see if we can do anything with that to start, get the ball rolling. I think I'll keep talking until somebody says anything. I think that when I talk about bread as a cultural object or a cultural entity, what's interesting to me is that in modern bread world, and Jonathan, you could speak to this a bit probably. Bread is very wheat centric. It's very Western centric. When people in our culture talk about bread, we are always talking about wheat bread. We are always talking about a very specific kind of bread. But we miss the fact that there's a reason that so much of bread produced in northern climes up until the 20th century, up until the industrial age, was primarily rye based, and that is because rye is a winter hardy, cold weather hardy grain. It grows really, really well in cold weather and colder climates. And wheat has always struggled with that. We've developed species of wheat that now can grow better in colder climates, but rye still doesn't need any help. It grows beautifully there. That's why you see Scandinavian cultures producing a lot of rye breads. When you look south, and we go to, say, Central America and South America, you'll find breads that are rooted in corn. In Africa, they're rooted in starchy tubers.
But then I love the idea that, and this is where I always gravitate, is that really grasses have cultivated us. I'm not really sure we've cultivated grasses. I feel entirely by that sort of logic that we've been cultivated by grasses, that we do have wheats now. We do have corns up here. We do have, these sorts of, that excites me in a way, because it does remind us that we're not the overall human, that we are cultivated, right? Exactly.
Yeah, that's what he's all about.
Yeah. And that
I'm
excites
totally
me.
down with that. I'm totally down with that. Yeah, we have a little, we have these stickers at work. Oh, and I had a pin. I think I have one on my bag. But we made pins that said servants of Ceres. Because that's what we are.
Yeah.
We're the servants of. Well, like, I totally relate to that ancient Greek thing. I have a strong Athenian kind of bent in me, and I'm totally down with Ceres and Demeter. I don't get too woo-woo about the Eleusinian mysteries, but I'm interested. I mean, if somebody showed me the door to that cave, I would go. I would drink the whatever it was they drank, and you'd go and you'd disappear for 3 days and you come back, right? And that's where that was embodied philosophy of bread. You disappear and you come back. That is, that's where the Christian resurrection comes from. It's wheat. Christ is the anointed one, right? That's what that means. And he was anointed with olive oil, right? What do you anoint with olive oil? Bread. What's the body of Christ? Bread. Well, all that stuff is Hellenistic. That's actually much, much older and more interesting the older that you get, right? A little less cannibalistic and weird, and a little more mythological. And you get into the Rarian field and Triptolemus and Persephone disappearing and coming back, and you have the cycles, and you think, oh, my job is to get into that stream and be useful in that stream. Get in the cycle, do your part, whatever it is. Grow the wheat, mill, scythe it, mill it, or just be the carter in between, or take it to the baker, like whatever. We all have a place. And it's not a mindless place. It's not like do your stupid job and shut up. It's no, actually, that we have work to do, and our work is to work with each other, to feed each other, and do it in such a way, as our friends here have shown us, where you don't destroy everything while you're doing it. Don't do it in such a way that you're going to make Wonder Bread and trash the planet, right? I mean, that's kind of basic, but we obviously haven't learned that. Right. We haven't even bothered to learn that one yet. So that's kind of where I come at it. And to me, philosophically, the beautiful thing about bread is it defies philosophy. It defies a lot of standard philosophy. It totally defies Platonic philosophy. There is no perfect bread. I hate it when people say, in search of the perfect loaf. For me, that's the end of the conversation. Nope. Okay, next conversation. Like, if you haven't learned any, you don't know about existentialism, like, what are we doing here, right? Like, Platonic loaves, and there are people still looking for that loaf, and they want to make it.
Yeah, but that's like saying, I don't know, the idea of, the minute the pencil touches the paper, you've destroyed math. Like, every time you bring an ideal into the world, if you have to reckon with materiality. And I just think that bread really puts you there in the most beautifully dramatic way, right? I'd like to hear about your like your struggles with bread and your how you each of you have like had to overcome failure through bread.
Every day. Every day. Bread will kick your ass. And that's why it's such a good teacher. Because it's every day is a change. Because the reason it's not platonic is that you are engaging with living materials. You're collaborating. It's not about your will. It's you have intent, but your will is non-operative. The more will you have, the less you're going to collaborate. You have intent and some humility about it, well, you might get somewhere. Because certainly if we're dealing with natural leavening like we do, and that's how you make, healthy bread, I'm a wild yeast farmer more than I am a baker, right? We give the cultures, and it's fun that's the word.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about your relationship to the yeast, especially like.
Well, it's your yeast and your
Yeah,
yeast
exactly.
and that yeast and this.
It's all in the air. The
Oh
magic,
my
the magic is not people who don't know. Well, like every day. So I have a very small shop, and customers are right there, which is really annoying half the time, and now the time it's great. So people don't know. They don't know anything. They don't know anything about bread. They don't know. I mean, we've only had it for 16,000 years, but so they don't know and we don't know the difference between packaged yeast and wild yeast, or sourdough. They don't know what sourdough is. So we're naturally leavening with wild yeast. We're inoculating every batch. We're essentially like servants of Ceres. We are the servants of the starter, and it's not about how old the starter is or whether it came from our grandmother or great grandmother. The magic isn't in the human history of it. The magic is in the air.
Yeah, I think that's what strikes me so much about the process is that the ubiquity of it. It is a constant, continuous process on every surface of everything in the world. We are just capitalizing, for lack of a better word, on the opportunity to direct it and to provide it with the necessary means to produce something that we can consume. So we're sort of manipulating the system a bit, but it is entirely necessary to give up your control of the process to the culture. Every time I make bread and it doesn't work, I would say 100% of the time, unless it's too much fire and I burnt it, 100% of the time when it doesn't work, it is fermentation, and it is my fault because I have had unreasonable expectations, or I have misunderstood what the culture was doing.
Okay, I'm just really interested right now.
Yeah.
What do you think? How would you think it plays? I'm just knowing nothing about fermentation and culture. We just use those two words together with relation to the bread and the yeast. But could you apply human culture, bread culture, to human culture in this process of fermentation? Could that be applied philosophically or politically? And how do you see that? How do you see fermentation? I mean, I'm sorry, but I consider something to be deeply wrong with the culture that we're in. And so if you're equating fermentation with something having been done, something went awry, you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. No rye pundit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. No.
Awry.
Awry.
No, it's good. No, the metaphor often works that way. Like that. I mean, it hasn't been fed. So our starters, we need to feed. I feed mine twice a day. Like that's our job. Our job is with water and flour. And you feed it. You touch the flour with your hands, because some of that culture is in your hands, and honestly in your mouth too. You wash your hands first, but you make sure you rinse them really well. So you're husbanding. You're you're being the assistant to the wild culture. Our larger culture isn't being fed. It's not being fed clean water. It's not being fed organic flour, and it's not being. So when you don't feed a starter,
It starts.
it goes
to feed
out.
itself.
It does
So
exactly.
it's a zombie
It-
apocalypse.
right.
Okay.
It goes alcoholic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Helpful.
But as soon as you start to feed it, it returns
Right.
to its natural
Feed it good stuff.
happy state.
Yeah.
I mean, in many ways, we're talking about, the good, right? We're sort of back to that argument always, right? You have to feed it the good in order to get, but what does that mean? Then we get into ethics and we get into responsibility. And that intent, to me, is our responsibility, our ability to respond to these bigger cultural problems, right? I don't see it much different than when we do talk about compost care and those sorts of also fermentations and regenerative structures, but then also vital materiality. And when you get into wild care and you start talking about that regenerative culture of the wood,
It's sort of letting the fermentation go through in a way, become a place where it can start to feed again.
right? And it becomes open, right?
Yeah.
It opens itself. It becomes vulnerable and open to what comes to it. And in many ways, the design of our intent is to make the best things come to it, right? And that's, it becomes that opening, right?
The trick too, of course, is to not reify any stage in the process.
Yeah,
Right.
no purity.
So,
Right.
so that is, as your introduction really put well, bread is easily reified, right? And artisan bread, boutique bread for wealthy white people has, of course, been reified for quite a long time. But, a lot of coffee table books are all about that. The Instagram loaf of bread, which costs $16 or whatever. And so people can focus on the part of the process and lose the bigger picture. And that happens a lot in the bread world, of course. So you don't get the critique. Yet people forget the bigger culture critique. And that's really unfortunate. That's a bummer. So we're seen as like wacky hippie bakers who can't make any money or goofing around, and whatever. I've given up worrying about that. But the serious conversations that go on, that doesn't happen. So I'm going in a couple of days. I'm going to the kneading conference, and that conversation just doesn't happen in the kneading conference. They invite people from the industry, and they don't get it. They don't get it.
Yeah.
And
And
that's
but
true.
That happens in all those sorts of markets too, right? Like in the larger cultural market, in art, in writing, right? Like there's in even organic farming. When we use the word organic farming, then we struggle with hydroponics, and we have these things that aren't quite really sunk into the soil or really into the place of fermentation, really into the place of intentionality and that grassroots. Like on some level, you're both just trying to feed people, right? And you're trying to feed them good things and intentional things, and that gets lost with the market just in general, right? Like in the market of these things, right? Just the same with art, and the same with all these bits that we want to be intentional.
Every day of the week, somebody comes in and says, how can you make good bread in this little college town that I live in? I can't find bread like this in New York City. And the straight up Marxist answer is the rents are too high. Okay. They can't make good bread in New York City because the rents are too high. That's what Scott Nearing would say, right?
Yeah.
And in a way, it's kind of a crude answer to confess out, but it's true. That is, they can't take the time to let the dough ferment, because that's what's making the difference. I'm not making the difference. It's time that makes the difference.
And diversity, right?
Right.
If you can, if the rent is too high,
Yeah.
and you don't get a diverse amount of people in there, you don't get cultures in there that all come together and do different things and introduce different things to each other.
Right.
Right. Like
Right.
that's
Yeah. So that's why there's less art in my college town than there used to be.
right.
Because there's landlords cranking up the rent. So, yeah.
Well, speaking of art, what I wanted to bring to the table is this offering of coarse ground kernza flour from Wisconsin, and this came from something called the Farm Art Detour. So I was very lucky to go and walk through farmlands in Wisconsin, and an artist went and collaborated with a family farm who's been growing and milling flour since the 1872 or something like that. But the this whole project was about bringing artists and farmers together. And what they've been able to do over a 30-year period, they're a couple. They remind me of the Nearings in a way. I grew up in Bangor, and I kind of always heard about this, this culture down here around Blue Hill, about the organic farming. It was like in the lore. And but they did something here. It's so wonderful to be here in their house and to actually see where this happened, because I always heard about it. But there was something about opening up this space for a kind of an artistic way of living. That's the way I would describe it, or an artistic philosophical way of being in the world that is counter to culture, that doesn't think about it. And so for me, being from away in the sense of I had never been to Wisconsin before, and I was able to walk these 100-acre farms and meet the people who made the projects and give this to me, give it to you, here you go. But I do think there's something special about these kinds of special encounters that are handmade. It's like the hand to hand, the relationships that, like you said, coming out of the ether. It's hard to quantify, but it is there, and it has a material quality to it. And I just offer it up as, Josh, in kind of response to your initial question, I had prepared a little remarks, but what I remember about making bread was my Nana had a recipe that she wrote in her very bold handwriting. My father's family was from Augusta, and it was oatmeal bread, and she would make it, and it was Nana's oatmeal bread. She made it in the tin pans. We had it all the summers. It would come out in Thanksgiving. After she passed, my mother would make the recipe. It's probably the only bread recipe that I actually make myself. So it is like a kind of cultural memory of this place. I wonder if other people have the oatmeal bread memory. But maybe you could tell me about oatmeal bread in relation to the wheat and the rye and is it something in like indigenous to Maine or no?
I can't speak specifically to the indigeneity of oats for Maine, but I think that what's interesting is that when we talk about, so oat bread is almost certainly, there's probably wheat in that oat bread. There's essentially no gluten in oat, which is one of the great things for those who struggle with gluten. But so it doesn't really build great structure, and so at least here in this culture, we don't make exclusively oat bread. It doesn't mean that it can't be done. We make cultures around the world make bread out of all kinds of things that have no gluten, and do it
And it grows well here.
It does grow well here. But I do think it is interesting because it speaks to me, for the moment anyways, that one of the conversations I have regularly with people is, I can't make bread. I tried to make bread. I tried to keep a culture, and I killed it. Bread's just too complicated. But what so few Americans specifically understand is that previous to 1850s, when we finally isolated that one perfect strain of yeast that produces really consistently and really quickly, everyone made bread. Everyone. It was 100% of all households made bread, frankly. And while you had, bakeries producing bread in some of the larger sort of urban municipalities and whatnot, basically everyone knew how to make bread.
But the baker was just the baker, right?
In a lot of cultures and in a lot of places, the baker was the one with the oven. And it's still common in a lot of cultures where households will produce their own dough, shape their own loaves, deliver it to the baker, and come back later that afternoon and collect their baked bread.
Nice.
So the thing about bread is that as I started out with it, is that it is not merely a uniquely human thing, but a universally and deeply embedded human thing. People have been making bread for tens of thousands of years, ever since we began having a relationship with grains. And everyone did it. And then the Industrial Revolution came along, and not only did we need all these people to leave the household and go work in these factories and begin to build turn the big wheels of progress, but we also figured out we could make super consistent, super predictable bread and crank out thousands of loaves a day with a couple of machines in a mechanical oven. And as a result of that, not only have we as Americans specifically lost our relationship, that intrinsic, deeply personal relationship with bread, but as a result, there are all these sort of catastrophic cascades of health consequences, environmental consequences, social, political, and economic consequences, specifically rooted in the loss of bread. So it's really remarkable to me to hear people talk about, I can't make bread. And so
that inclusion of oats though then feels very like almost like in order to get any kind of oat bread, it is Nana's or Nana's or grandma's
Right.
or your
Again.
aunties, right? Like it's always going to be somebody's specific cultural aunt and bread again.
Which brings us to AI.
Oh man,
Oh, no.
we're gonna go there.
Because I think that one of the biggest problems, and it was set up when the Industrial Revolution was born, is that essential emphasis on outcome, and the recipe was born to support the outcome, and the template was born to support the outcome. It isn't an archetype. It isn't a thing it isn't something abstract. It isn't something that you can put your soul and your story into and shape it to the new. It's not a starter. It's an ender.
Yeah.
Sorry. There.
Oh,
No,
good.
that's good.
Did your Nana have Scottish roots?
A little English, like from the main English.
'Cause
My
any-
grandmother
oh,
had a
Yeah,
oatmeal
oats.
recipe as well.
I would think
There's a strong
oats like
Scots
oat.
Irish.
Yeah, oat cakes
Yeah.
are totally Scottish.
Yeah.
And then probably as you go down through Northumberland or something, you get a little more wheat in there, and
Yeah. I just
oats.
maybe
are-
it was just that it was oat, the oats that you eventually, maybe it was not even that deep. It was maybe the oatmeal. that you
But
would
even
buy.
sort of anadama, is that not oat based
Yep.
or
And
oatmeal
And
based?
it's corn based.
Corn
Yeah.
out. But a lot of
Yeah.
people tell me their
You just take,
their Nana puts oatmeal
Yeah,
in there.
but
exactly.
that's it.
That's
Because
just-
their nana was making from whatever they had,
Right.
in a very
Yeah.
scarce and sparse
Right,
environment,
exactly.
yeah,
and they had to make do. Making do is different from making Wonder Bread.
Yes,
Right.
or any kind of perfect.
Right.
Well, and it's funny too, because I see in the contemporary bread world, there are sort of two great responses to that industrialized capitalist approach to food production. And one of them is the sort of deeply artisanal, artistic, long view sourdough world that we're now embedded in, where every loaf, they're always trying to get to that perfect loaf. There's a preciousness about the bread that they're baking and making. And it is very oriented towards the very precise, specific, correct ingredients and measurements and ratios, etc. And so we brought all these books, and we have this beautiful book, and I love this book. I'm not speaking ill of this book or its very brilliant author, Dan Leader. But this book, Living Bread, is a great example of sort of that response. It's every loaf in here is gorgeous. It's very artisanally approached. He talks
It's a
about
book.
it is. It's wonderful. The opposite movement is represented by one of my favorite books and one of my favorite bread people who you may meet this week.
You don't
Stuart
already know
Silverstein.
him. You know it.
Oh,
Yeah.
I know another book
What's
of
the
his.
name?
Yeah. So the book is Bread, Earth, and Fire. And what I love about Stu is that he makes cob ovens to bake bread, and he does these small, tiny little things, just mocks them up in a day, and he'll bake bread. And when he bakes bread, he takes flour, doesn't matter what it is, flour, water, and salt, mixes them together till it seems like it's the right consistency, shapes it in a little ball, shoves it in the oven, and bakes the crap out of it. Sometimes they come out misshapen. They're slightly burnt on one side, and
Yeah.
he is like, "Look at this beautiful bread."
Right.
And I agree, it's magnificent. The idea that there's no perfect loaf is true, and that at the same time, every loaf is perfect. Yeah. And I think that's a really I love his response is, no, you just make bread.
Yeah.
Bread is a completely accessible cultural thread that Americans specifically have forgotten how to access, have forgotten how to have a relationship with. And so it's funny, right? This sort of, as we approach hopefully post-capitalism, right? And we move away from this deeply industrialized, deeply codified world that we live in. There are those two sort of branches, that two directions that are traveling.
I've never met Dan Peter, but I was just talking about him with my friends Tim and Lydia over here at Tinder Hearth, who are remarkable bakers. They're pretty good friends with him. Okay, they know him, and I know his ex-wife Sharon, who's quite lovely actually, and she runs the business, or she has been continuing to run the business. Their business is called Bread Alone, which honestly I think is a kind of remarkably comical misquote of the Bible, but
Yeah, right.
because it's really not bread alone,
Yeah.
but we all know that. Huge business, okay, huge leader in the artisan world. It's commercial artisan. It has little to do with our little folky corner of the bread world. Their newish bakery in Kingston, New York, is a paragon of just kind of eco-industrial bread production. I haven't seen it. I'm actually curious. I'm curious about the manufacturing plant more than I am about the bread. If only because, and I'm not sure this is true, but it's entirely powered by solar panels. Okay. And then there's all these machines. And as Tim was saying, or Lydia was saying, human hands barely touch the dough, which is essentially AI, right? Moving in that direction. Yeah. The energy dimension of it is of interest to me.
Yeah.
If only because, hey, I bake bread with a wood-fired oven. It's kind of crazy. And I've been doing it for 30 years. And sometimes the wood's dry, and sometimes it's not dry, and sometimes it's smoky, and I hate that. I hate it when it's smoky. And I don't love burning wood every day, especially in the middle of the summer. And if I could wave a wand and, do it differently, I would, but I can't. It's just, that's the planet we live on. Guess what? You want heat, you have to burn something. We live in a carbon cycle. And I have the most, after 5 or more ovens over the last 30 years, I have the most efficient wood-fired oven I can find. So I'm not wasting wood the way I might otherwise be. But all to say that's one of the extremes here. Yeah. For me, this book, first of all, this book is not for baking. This book is for sitting on a coffee table. Okay? It's not to get flour on or get dough on. Right? This book is
beautiful.
It's too beautiful. It is too beautiful. I hate books like this because they're there to shame you. There's nothing. This is essentially a Playboy centerfold in food form. Okay, this is. I know people call it food pornography, but it is food pornography. Okay, yeah. And it's for you to say, "Oh, I don't have curves like that. Oh, my bread doesn't have curves like that," but it amounts to the same thing, right? You're nothing. You're zero. And I don't have a French accent.
It's the ideal.
Right. It's the ideal. Oh, c'est un baguette de tradition. Je m'en fous de ça. I grew up speaking French in Montreal. Guess what? Speaking French isn't that hard to do. And it doesn't give you a degree in bread baking. Right. It's the cheapest ticket to pseudo-authenticity in America. Call your bakery a French name. I hate that. It's so bullshit.
Oh, bon pain.
Yeah, exactly. Exactement. So, yeah, there might be some things to learn in here, but also Dan Leader, like who we were talking about, the other Dan we were talking about earlier, the guy who named a kind of wheat after himself, Dan Barber, named a wheat after himself. Hubris, thy name is Dan. Is Dan, period. Right? So, like, where's that at?
Right.
We are in, I know this is an old-fashioned kind of, I'm misappropriating this phrase, but I always like the phrase, a great chain of being. And I don't mean that in the medieval way of like, oh, the angels are here and the people are here and the ants are down there. But we, in my more like egalitarian great chain of being, there we have a horizontal chain and a vertical chain. And our horizontal chain, and it's an unending chain, right? There's the farmers and the millers and the bakers and the people who eat the bread and the kids who, and it goes on and on. We're just a little link. And then historically, of course, there's like, the people who selected grain and, and the Fertile Crescent and the, all the rest of them, right? Yeah, he's on the chain. We're all on the chain. And the joy of being a baker in a retail shop is I know my miller and I know some of my growers in a way that people didn't 10 years ago or 20 years ago. But I know my customers. As annoying as some of them are, they come in and I know them. I actually know their children and I know their parents and I know a remarkable amount about them now that I've been there for 21 years. And they tell me when doesn't work, or they tell me they liked it, but it's not just about the bread. We talk about music, we talk about other things, but that's what passes it on. It's not reflecting back on me.
Yeah, it's also not an inert object that you're handing to them either. It's like the bread was in a bad mood that day, so deal with it.
Right.
The oven was in a bad mood that day. The wood what a gas baker. I'm just being biased, but what gas baker even thinks about what you're thinking about, trying to be better with the more efficient burn, the more sustainable.
Well, I think that's the translation piece too. Like on some level, Dan Leader is translating. How do we translate all these ideas that we think are good when we come into this ethics question? What is the good, and how can I translate that to be bigger, better, and shinier? And that is one direction, right?
Yeah.
There are problems with burning wood too, right? But there are problems. He uses electric. There's problems with electric and where we get our electricity and all that sort of thing. So, but for me, it's the return to the intention. It's the keeping it small, keeping it personable, making sure that whatever you're doing, because we all have to translate. Being in a capitalist society, we have to translate as best we can the gifts that we have that we want to give, right? They're all in translation. Maybe that's not the best word, but that's, and it's going to go through those stages, like even just using the term bread alone, right? That's already a translated metaphor, right? Both through time, space, language, all those things. And so we translate these things. How do we keep it as close to the chest as what we mean to say, to keep our meaning and our content, as rich and as connected as we can be? Because I don't know, burning wood sounds pretty brilliant if you're doing it on a small scale. It's not like burning coal, which is a whole other horrible translation for folks, So if this guy wants to try and translate it in this direction, all right, let's see where that goes, I guess. That's all we can do. It's the other people, but I don't know. There's something about that in translation that excites me.
Yeah, and I think what excites me about it is that, just like I took a class at the Maine Center for Craftsmanship. I just love going down there and just playing with things, but wood was what they do. So there were two people that were teaching the same class. One taught micro carving, which used this micro carver, like a industrial, looked like a dental tool, basically, to carve wood, right? And the other guy, so the first half of the week was all learning how to use this tool and how to apply it to this wood. Very little time was spent talking about the wood. It was just the block that had already been, made into a block for you, nice and clean, ready to start with a clean slate, right? And the next guy comes in, and he, in the second half of the week, was like, okay, let's go outside. I'm going to teach you how to read a tree. That was where I felt like, okay, now we're coming alive, because now I'm starting to negotiate with this living thing that is the wood, the bread, this constellation of being that is the yeast, and wheat and whatever else it's interacting with in your hands, it's happening. It's all there, and you have to be alive to it and awake to it. And I question an approach to this concept of sustainability that I think has tripped us up. And our relation, this is an unformed question, but I'm thinking about this relationship. Does this idea of sustainability, is that actually couched in the industrial a little too far? It's definitely been commandeered, at least in forestry, say, and agriculture, of course, with capitalism. Sustainability is what sustains us, not what sustains all
life on Earth.
Yeah.
So, and maybe that sustainability is part of that translation. And maybe translation is part of the problem. And sort of the opposite of translation would be conversation. Having a direct conversation with that dialogue between the wood, between you, between the bread, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. The artist who did this project, he called it agricultural recon craft. He came from Los Angeles. He arrived in Wisconsin. He met the people. He came as an artist in residence from this couple who moved from Chicago, bought a 40-acre farm in Sauk County, Wisconsin, which is the world of Aldo Leopold. It is seriously a gorgeous part of the world if you haven't been there. But just that touch, it was like he came from away, he saw something, and then he was a sculptor, so he made the kind of portable ovens. That's what he did. So he uses the ovens to bake the bread. So they're very small.
Have you had this Kernza bread?
I have had some bread there.
What do you think of it?
I mean, for me, it was like so joyful. I was in heaven in this place. So it was just part of the whole experience.
So do you know about Kernza? So
No.
it's interesting. I bet Elliot could talk about this. But Kernza is a very long-term project from the Land Institute, West Jackson and Land Institute, to basically create a perennial wheat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I trust their intent. This is not, USDA, whatever. I mean, these guys have been on it for a long time. And if it breaks through, it could be a game changer. It's like one of these, like, hey, let's try this thing, okay? Because the wheat, there's many discussions about wheat and how it's grown, or hybridization, or wheat is a hybrid, so we can't get too freaked out about that, right? And whatever. There's a lot of questions about wheat, or just new kinds of wheat, dwarf wheat, whatever. Terroir, I think that's a sketchy term. Like, again, it's a French term, so we throw it around because and it has to do with wine. It's like, I think most of the terroir in bread comes from the starter, and you have to have good flour. But it's a tricky one. So Kernza's interesting project. I haven't had any that tasted good. So the only Kernza, so they're growing some near me at the Smith College Experimental Gardens. And I went over there. I mean, it's all of 2 miles away from my house. I rode over there on my bicycle, and I met the guy who's doing it. It was fascinating. I mean, I'm totally interested. But he gave me some, and I made it into crackers, and it didn't have enough protein to make crackers, and it tasted kind of rancid. Now, maybe the package had been sitting around too long. Like, you don't know. Flour is a living thing, and it shouldn't sit around too long. Like, that was the problem. Like, that was something we all had to relearn after, like, hippies made bad bread because guess what? They were buying whole wheat flour that had been sitting in a bin for months and months at the co-op, and nobody told them. Like that's Peter Schumann's big breakthrough. He makes everybody grind the rye berries by hand while they're having meetings in the kitchen, right?
So we don't have any witches.
Yeah. Well, we have new mills. Actually, that's a big breakthrough in the last few years. This guy in Vermont makes these remarkable mills.
Oh.
Yeah, Andrew Hain.
Nice.
Like that is broken through, and people are learning about wheat. But so the people are learning that rancid wheat doesn't taste good, and it's still a thing. So I'm intrigued,
Okay.
and it should work,
It's 1 year old.
but I don't think it's there yet.
Yeah.
I don't think it's there. And I don't know if you've worked with Kernza.
I haven't.
Yeah.
No. I am less enthusiastic about the idea of it. I'm not against it. You know, if it works, there's an opportunity certainly there. But it takes me back to my earliest point about the idea of culture and bread being a cultural object. You know, like, so this book, Living Bread, let's beat up on Dan Leader again. No, but this book, Living Bread, you know, it's tradition and innovation in artisan bread making, and it's sort of authoritative. This is bread, and it's very Eurocentric. And the very first chapter in here, the title of the chapter, let's see if we can find it. There we go. The first chapter is Changing Wheat Landscapes. So there's no discussion of bread that is not based in wheat. And that's fine, because wheat is obviously fairly universally used for bread making. But at the same time, wheat has sort of knocked out other sort of culturally founded breads as it travels around the world and as we've brought it around the world. And the idea of doing a perennial wheat where we can plant it and it just keeps going and going is beautiful. But at the same time, I worry that we're going to wind up losing all of these other things. You know? So as you look around the world, you know, we speak about bread and we speak about bread culture in a very Western, white-centric, sort of idealized way. Not, you know, like, and this is the broad,
Except
this is
wheat
the broad,
isn't just Western.
No, it's not. It isn't. But that is how we approach it.
Sure, but it's really from,
Sure.
you know, Iran and
Sure. Yeah.
Turkey and
Exactly.
places that we don't think. I mean, Khorasan means west.
Exactly. But
it's
when
not
you
west
tell,
to us.
when you tell people that comes as a surprise.
Yeah, well, people
Right.
don't know.
Just
anything.
just like when you tell people apples are from Afghanistan. Right. Apples, the apples originate in the Afghan mountains. That's the root of the apple. You know, as American as apple pie becomes a whole different kind of concept when you look at the actual origins of the species. So I just think it's interesting. You know, when we talk about wheat, when we talk about bread, we always talk about wheat, but there are so many different kinds of breads that have nothing to do with wheat. And so the conversation about bread should include other things.
And
We
not
should be
always
able-
leavening.
Right, and unleavened. You know, is an unleavened bread not a bread? You know, it doesn't have. You know, there are demonstrable reasons, and there are solid arguments for why fermented risen bread, leavened bread, is better for us digestively, physiologically. But that should not negate or sort of disqualify breads that are not fermented or risen in some fashion. You know, so Irish soda bread is a perfectly legitimate, beautiful bread. There's no leavening in there, no natural leavening. It's not yeasted bread. It's done chemically, but it is a culturally valued thing. You know, and again, tortillas are bread. Are they risen bread? No, not generally, but they are still a legitimate bread form. And so,
And they have, of course, their similar process that they go through. You know, when you're nixtamalizing the corn,
exactly.
You're acculturating essentially.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's something very few people know or understand.
Exactly.
And that's super important.
And that brings me, so
We're kind of coming up on a time period. We want to keep these conversations in a framework so that we can keep having them and have a way to do it. So come up with maybe some final thoughts. I think you lead really nicely into this little piece I just wanted to read you about sort of the politics of bread. And then I also know that Jonathan maybe brought some poems. Maybe we could end with something
Twist my
marvelous.
arm.
Okay. So do we have some final thoughts?
Looking at me.
No, I'm just you're next in line.
Well, I'm really fascinated now. I want to go dive a little deeper into the making of bread. What happens, what it means to make bread, and what it means to make dough. I think these are the
That's a
things
great
I'm going to be
phrase.
leaving with.
Right?
Making
Yeah.
dough and making do.
Making
Yeah.
dough and making do.
Mm.
That's another conference.
I think for me, there's something important about the repetition with bread and with bread making. So it's just something to think about, and just also the touch, with the personal touch with making bread, picking up bread, having the relationships over periods of time. Children, as we see them grow up. That seems to be something very important with your two practices. So repetition and touch.
Yeah, I like that. Anything leading yet?
This is all, it's good. It's good to talk about the bread, and to think about, again, what's our intent?
Yeah.
And the intent can't just be, I'm going to become a celebrity baker one day, that's just not where it's at. But if your intent is to feed people, and to be that link, and we're really privileged to be in a moment, even with all the crap going on and that terrible bread I grew up with terrible bread. Culturally, you want to talk about my cultural background? That's like bad bread. But because I grew up in suburbs, my parents were busy. They were busy.
Yeah.
Really good people who were busy and not that food centric, which is maybe why I make bread. But one thing we did have is I lived in the suburbs of Montreal. So when we go into the city, you go to the bagel shop. And if you guys have ever had Montreal bagels, it's like, that's it. It's like game over. Like there's a fire going on. There's people playing with the peels. They're flipping. You ever watch this? There's a fire banked on they're open 24 hours a day. 24 hours a day. You go there after a jazz concert, it's midnight, it's whatever. There's a whole fire banked here. There's rows of bagels. And there's some guy, and they're not like yeshiva students, okay? They're like Palestinian guys, they're Salvadorian guys, they're like from all over the world. And they're rolling out the dough, and they're flipping on their hands, and they're flipping. There's a big hunk of dough, and they put it in the water, and they take it out of the water, and then they put it on this long peel, and they put it in, and then they move them closer and closer to the fire, and then when they take them out, they flick their wrist, and there's like 24 bagels, and they go flying in the air, and then they fall magically into the basket. And you think,
I'm gonna do this right
yeah,
now.
and you think, oh, I want that. I want that. I want to do that. It is totally performance art.
Wow.
And then you eat it, and it's warm, and it's like, oh my God. And it's like cold and snowy outside, and you think, this is it. This is nurturing. This is real life right here. And honestly, that hasn't changed for me. Like, that's the thing. That's the cultural, root. Borrowed, essentially, but like, that's what it comes down to. And like, sometimes you just honor that part. Like, okay. And I still can't make bagels because I don't have the right oven, and takes up too much production time, and it's right. But I try to talk about people from New York City, and they don't know anything about bagels. They think they do, but they don't. Anyway, that's mine. But I'll read a poem or two later.
Excellent. Well, I want to finish just my thoughts, just sort of in that political realm, just to kind of throw it out there as well. There's some really good stuff we got here to work with, huh? I'm excited. This is just an overview, just sort of all the places, you know. It was in Les Miserables that Victor Hugo recounts his shock at watching an impoverished man being arrested for stealing a loaf of bread to assuage his family's hunger. And the author continues to use bread as a barometer of character in his work. Hugo uses this theft of bread to highlight the social injustices of early 19th century France, inspiring food programs and political resistance groups at this time. Actually, because of his writing, people went out and started food programs, started feeding people. Kropotkin, The Conquest of Bread, stands as a collectivist manifesto for left-leaning politicals, revolutionaries, and anarchists, critiquing Mikhail Bakunin's wage-oriented collective system goals for the practical materials of agriculture. Kropotkin's book chants out bread and sustenance of labor and food as a rallying cry for freedom. This idea is carried further by suffragist Rose Schneiderman's speeches regarding labor and the women's movement, when she says there is no harder contest than the contest for bread, and attributed with the political phrase bread and roses, later connected with the 1912 Lawrence, Massachusetts textile labor strike. In 1924, Katie Kollwitz, in collaboration with the Help by the Artist group, offered a lithograph, I wish I had it here, entitled Brot, on the back of a Gerhard Hauptmann theater poster of a mother with two crying children pulling at her dress. The immediacy of the moment, of the need not just for food but for social action and care, is apparent in this ironic and powerful piece. This sense is mirrored by Bertolt Brecht, who starts his poem The Bread of the People. Justice is the bread of the people. Sometimes it is plentiful, sometimes it is scarce, sometimes it tastes good, sometimes it tastes bad. When the bread is scarce, there is hunger. When the bread is bad, there is discontent. There's a lot of play there. So we take that cultural right into sort of that political idea that it's really bread is tied to freedom. Bread is tied to our access to freedom.
Indeed.
And I'll end there. What gifts have you brought?
All right. Well, I think there's two I want to read. If that's all right. There's too many of these, but I think there's two that have to do with Maine, sort of, or right here and Maine. So one of them is called Reversible Falls, which of course there are some right here, right? And it had a mill on them, which is so cool. That is the coolest thing. Yeah. Reversible Falls. Dip your bucket in a clean sea. Pour that ocean in a wheat field. Run a mill wheel on a tide wave. That'll salt your bread. Build your oven on a cliffside. Raise your dough inside a fog's bank. Burn some driftwood for a fine fire, and that'll sort your bread. Tell a Tuscan in a time machine to turn back the Roman tax. Love a loaf with elements. That'll butter your bread just right. Tuscan bread doesn't have salt in it because of the Roman salt tax.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's why it's not very good.
That's why it's not very good. Well, that's why you have to dip it in salt.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right. Estuary. Wheat grows just upstream, high on the left bank, topples in and floats away like an old-time timber run. It all snags on Rosemary Island. It floods that little delta knob and waits on a brackish tide. Eddy of salt swirl, desiccated cloud of sea, white as a Caribbean beach, saline as plasma. Sodium, Chloe rides her countercurrents oceanward all the way, right into my mixing bowl. Then Levin lands in a simoom, hot from the Levant. In this merry meeting bay where the perch and the porpoise meet, where ingredients gather and swirl and snow melt and wave foam, estuary of inoculation, seeding clam bubbles in the sand, waiting on the summer's oven to somehow be rebuilt. Yeah.
What an adventure.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much for those.
Thank
They're a little like esoteric,
I
but
like it.
that's the kind of thing I think about while I'm baking bread.
Yeah. As it should be.
Yeah,
As it should be.
right. But just a footnote on that is that the water, the salt content in the ocean is the same salt content that I put on my bread, and it's the same salt content as our bodies, and our water content in our bodies is the same hydration that I put in my dough. And those are not, there are coincidences in the Euclidean sense of a coincidence.
Yeah, well, yeah. And I was like, stay tuned for the discussion on ocean philosophy, the Ocean Collective that you began.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, bread and ocean go totally together.
Yeah.
So there was this one French bread book I read, and the whole thing was a pile of junk, except for one fact in there, that the French Navy for hundreds of years have made bread with salt water.
Nice.
Because you can do it.
Yeah.
Ding.
Yeah.
And I've done it, and it's great.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you,
Well, thank
Rachel.
you.
Thank you, Rachel, for
Yeah.
putting this together.
Thank you. And we brought other stuff if you just want to play
Yeah.
at this point. We're
Yeah.
just wanted to
we're edited. Thank you. Thank you for joining
Thanks for
us.
your patience, guys.
think about this conversation without thinking what you must be thinking.
I know.